Have you ever stayed awake, not because of pain, but because of betrayal that wore a familiar face? What if I told you silence could be louder than any comeback, and dignity, your strongest form of defense, because true strength isn't about controlling others. It's about not letting others control your peace. And welcome to a space where we don't just react, we reflect, in a world obsessed with being heard. This channel is for those who are learning the art of restraint, self-respect, and stoic clarity. Today's episode is not about fighting gossip, nor fixing misunderstandings. It's about reclaiming your power, not by shouting louder, but by standing still. We'll explore timeless stoic principles that help you stay rooted, even when the winds of judgment blow hardest. If you've ever been talked about behind your back, misunderstood, or misjudged, this message is yours. And if you're ready to build strength that doesn't shake with rumors, hit subscribe, join our stoic community, and let's rise, not in noise, but in presence. One, building the strength to be misunderstood. I want you to imagine this. You walk into a room with an open heart, a calm presence, and a sincere story to share. You're not trying to impress. You're not pretending. You're just being you. Kind, honest, real. And yet, the look in their eyes, it's distant, doubtful, maybe even cold. They don't hear you the way you meant to be heard. They twist your words. They project their fears onto your face. You've been misunderstood, and not just by strangers, but maybe by those closest to you. Have you ever felt that way? I think you have. Most of us have. And the harder part, the more you live with integrity, the more you walk with intention and stay true to your values, the more likely you are to be misunderstood, because you're not trying to please everyone. You're not trying to fit in, you're trying to live right. And that's not always popular. But here's the truth I want to share with you today, one that's changed how I walk through the world. You will be misunderstood, no matter how kind you are, how careful you are, or how pure your intentions. And instead of trying to avoid it, we need to learn how to carry it, with peace, with dignity, with strength. Let me tell you a story. I have a friend named James, a philosophy teacher in Colorado, gentle, wise, the kind of person who listens more than he speaks. He spent years teaching young people how to think deeply, how to ask better questions, how to see life beyond black and white. But one day, a student accused him of bias, said James had a personal agenda. It wasn't true, but the faculty didn't know him like I did. Rumors started, meetings were held. James, the same man who gave everything to his students, was now the subject of suspicion. When I asked him how he felt, he just smiled and said, "I don't live to be understood. I live not to betray myself." That stayed with me. Because here's the thing, we can't control how others perceive us, but we can control how we show up and how we respond when we're seen unfairly. Dr. Breen Brown, a researcher on vulnerability and courage, found something remarkable. People who live wholehearted, expressive, creative lives, those who are truly authentic, are often the ones most frequently misunderstood. Why? Because they're not following a script. They're not living to be approved. They're living to be real, and realness makes people uncomfortable. Being misunderstood isn't always a punishment. Sometimes it's a sign that you're living with depth, with nuance, with a kind of truth that others might not be ready to receive. I want you to hear this clearly. Just because someone misinterprets your silence as pride, your kindness as weakness, or your honesty as arrogance, that does not mean they're right. It only means they're looking through a lens you didn't create. There's a quote I love: "The way people treat you is often a reflection of their story, not your character." So when you're misunderstood, ask yourself, is this a mirror of me or a mirror of them? I remember a woman named Linda, a community leader in California, always the first to show up with food, a warm hug, and a listening ear. And yet, people said she was too emotional, too idealistic, too sensitive. But Linda never changed. She told me once, "I'd rather be misunderstood for being too good than be celebrated for being fake." Her words reminded me, the world doesn't need more people pretending. It needs more people like you, sincere, steady, even when it's lonely. So how do we build the strength to be misunderstood? First, we accept that it will happen. It's part of being human. We come from different wounds, different worlds, and we filter reality through our own scars. People will not always see you clearly. That's not your fault. That's just how communication works. Imperfect, messy, deeply human. Second, we create space between the truth and the reaction. Just because someone reacts negatively to you doesn't mean you've done something wrong. Sometimes their reaction is more about what they're carrying than what you've said. You don't owe anyone a diluted version of yourself just to make them comfortable. And third, maybe most importantly, don't let the pain of being misunderstood make you cold. Don't let it make you shrink. Don't let it convince you to stop showing up with an open heart, because once you do, the misunderstanding has one. I want you to remember something deeply. Your clarity doesn't need to be public. It just needs to be real. You don't have to explain yourself to every critic. You don't have to soften your convictions just to blend in. Live with honesty, with compassion, and with the quiet confidence of someone who knows who they are. There's a quiet kind of power in that, the power of restraint, of resilience, of not needing to be seen perfectly to keep doing what's right. And if someone misjudges you today, just smile gently. They're not seeing the full picture, but you are. And that matters more. Thank you for being here, for listening, for being someone who cares enough to ask deep questions. If this message spoke to something inside you, I'd love to hear from you in the comments. And remember, don't let being misunderstood shake your spirit. You're on a meaningful path, and even if it's not always recognized, it's always worth walking. To let your life speak louder than your words. Have you ever felt the urge to defend yourself, to prove your intentions, to correct a misunderstanding, to shout out, "That's not who I am"? I have. Many times. It's natural. We all want to be seen clearly, especially when our integrity is questioned or our motives are misunderstood. But over time, I've come to learn something deeply humbling, something that's changed the way I move through the world. The most powerful argument you can ever make is your life, not your defense, not your carefully crafted words, not the comment you're tempted to type, but the quiet, unshakable consistency of how you choose to live. Let me explain. I once knew a man named David. He ran a small bookstore in a quiet town in Oregon. David wasn't loud. He didn't argue. He wasn't the kind to give speeches or win debates. But every single day, he showed up at that store, opened the doors, greeted each customer with warmth, remembered the names of children who came in to browse comic books, gave free coffee to tired teachers, and never once complained about the long hours or slow days. One day, a competitor accused him of stealing business, spreading rumors that David was undercutting prices dishonestly. People talked, whispered, questioned. David didn't post a long message defending himself on Facebook. He didn't confront the other business owner. He just kept showing up, smiling, serving, living his truth. And over time, those whispers faded. People saw the truth for themselves, not because he argued, but because he embodied the truth. You see, your actions tell a story your words never could. There's something undeniably compelling about a person who doesn't need to explain who they are, because their life already does. Their consistency, their kindness, their presence, it says everything. It's what the Stoics believed. The ancient philosophy that teaches us to live with discipline, virtue, and clarity. Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor and philosopher, once wrote, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." That's it. Be one. Not talk about it, not convince others, just live it. But here's the catch. Choosing action over argument takes enormous strength, because silence, in the face of misunderstanding, can feel like surrender. And showing up every day with grace, even when you feel misjudged, requires inner courage most people never see. But that's exactly why it's so powerful. Think about someone you deeply admire, not because of what they said, but because of how they lived. Maybe it's a parent, a mentor, a quiet leader in your community. Chances are, it wasn't their speeches that moved you. It was the little things, how they treated others, how they handled adversity, how they kept their word when no one was watching. That's the kind of person I want to be. And I believe that's the kind of person you want to be too. So what does this look like in practice? It means, instead of defending your reputation, you protect your character. It means When someone challenges your intentions, you let time reveal the truth. It means when you're doubted, you stay steady, not bitter, not angry, just grounded. Let me share another story. This one's about a woman named Sarah. She was passed over for a promotion at work, despite being the most qualified person on the team. The manager chose someone with more visibility, someone who knew how to talk themselves up. Her friends told her to speak up, to argue, to point out the unfairness. But Sarah did something else. She congratulated the chosen colleague, and then she worked harder, taught others, stayed late, treated everyone with humility and respect. 6 months later, the team's performance soared, and everyone, even the upper management, knew why. She didn't demand recognition. She didn't ask for applause. Her results spoke louder than her resentment ever could have. Now, does this mean you should never speak up, never defend yourself, never use your voice? Of course not. There are moments when speaking is necessary, especially when injustice is involved or when silence would cause harm. But more often than not, we spend too much energy trying to win arguments that don't actually matter. And here's a question I want you to consider. Would you rather be right or be respected? Would you rather win a debate or live in a way that no debate is even needed? Your daily actions, how you show up at work, how you talk to your spouse, how you handle conflict, that's your real message to the world. And here's the beauty of this kind of living. When your life is your argument, you don't need to fight for your worth. You just need to be undeniably consistent, not perfect, not flashy, just deeply consistent. In time, people notice, even the ones who doubted you, even the ones who talked behind your back. Because while words can be twisted, integrity cannot be fake. So if you're watching this and feeling tired of explaining yourself, tired of being misunderstood, tired of not being valued the way you deserve, let me offer you this. You don't need to prove anything today. You just need to keep showing up with heart, with humility, with quiet strength. And that is enough. Let the way you live speak for itself. Let your kindness be your statement. Let your discipline be your reply. Let your peace be your rebuttal. In the end, the loudest truth is always the one that doesn't need to shout. Thank you for being here with me. Thank you for being the kind of person who wants to live with integrity, even when it's hard. If this message spoke to something deep in you, I'd love to hear your reflections. And remember, don't argue for your worth, live it. Let your life be your voice. 3. Gossip is a silent betrayal. It doesn't always come from enemies. Sometimes it comes from friends, colleagues, even family. The pain is real, but emotional reaction only feeds the falsehood. Not all betrayal wears a villain's face. Sometimes it wears a smile. Sometimes it has your number saved in their phone. Sometimes it hugs you in public and wounds you in private. That's the thing about gossip. It rarely comes from strangers. It comes from people who know you, or at least people who think they know you. And when it happens, it stings in a way that's hard to explain. Not just because of the words that were said, but because of who said them. Have you ever had that moment? You walk into a room, and the energy shifts. They smile politely, but you feel it. Something's changed. And later, you hear it from someone else. Did you know they've been saying things about you? Your first instinct might be disbelief. Not them. No way. Then comes the confusion, the anger, the betrayal, and then, perhaps the hardest part, the silence. You don't want to cause drama, but you can't unhear what's been said. You don't want to stoop to their level, but your heart still aches. What do you do with that pain? I want to talk to you heart to heart about something we don't discuss enough as adults, the wounds that gossip leaves behind. You see, gossip is a silent betrayal. It doesn't raise its voice. It doesn't confront you directly. It whispers. It moves in shadows. It pretends to be concerned. It masks itself in just sharing or only being honest. But make no mistake, gossip is a form of disloyalty. It's an emotional cowardice, and it cuts deep because it's personal. The hardest part, it often comes from people we trusted. Not enemies, not strangers online, but friends, colleagues, family, people who've shared meals with us, laughed with us, maybe even prayed with us. And now, without warning, they've turned us into a story, one we don't get to control. Why do they do it? Sometimes it's jealousy. Sometimes it's boredom. Sometimes it's projection. They can't handle their own shortcomings, so they point out yours. And sometimes people simply don't have the courage to confront you directly, so they process their feelings in secret by recruiting others to agree with them. But here's the trap. When we respond emotionally, we validate the lie. We give it power. We let the gossip grow legs. We start fighting a battle we never needed to enter in the first place. So I want to offer you a different way. I once heard this quote, and it changed how I deal with gossip. The best revenge is living well, with quiet dignity. Let that settle for a moment. Quiet dignity, not rage, not public shaming, not the dramatic unfollowing or cold silences. Just grace, strength, and above all, clarity. Because gossip, at its core, is noise, and noise thrives on reaction. But when you stay calm, when you hold your peace, when you keep being exactly who you are, consistent, kind, steady, the noise dies out, because there's nothing to feed it. Let me tell you a story. There was a woman named Emily, a manager at a healthcare company in Texas. Hardworking, respected, until one day a colleague she mentored, someone she thought was a friend, started spreading rumors. Nothing major at first, just whispers, little seeds of doubt. Emily's playing favorites. She's not really that qualified. She only got that promotion because of connections. At first, Emily was devastated. She wanted to confront her, to clear her name, to explain. But then she paused and took a different path. She doubled down on what she already knew how to do best: work with integrity, lead with kindness, speak with clarity. She refused to engage in the gossip. She didn't play politics, and over time, her team saw the truth. The whisperer, she burned her own credibility. Emily, she became even more respected, not because she shouted, but because she stood. That's what I want for you. Because here's the truth. Gossip says more about the speaker than the subject. If someone can speak about you behind your back, they were never standing beside you in the first place. Let me offer you a few thoughts, not as rules, but as gentle reminders. You don't have to correct every rumor. Truth doesn't always shout. Sometimes it just outlives the lie. Don't become what hurt you. If gossip wounded you, don't respond with gossip of your own. Take the higher path. You'll sleep better. Protect your inner circle. If someone gossips to you, they'll likely gossip about you. Choose your people wisely. Ask yourself, what would peace do? Would peace confront this? Would peace let it go? Would peace rise above? And above all, remember this: you are not what people say about you when you're not in the room. You are who you are when you're standing alone, when no one's watching, when your only audience is your conscience. Let them talk. Let them twist. Let them turn your name into a narrative. But don't you dare shrink. Don't you dim your light just because someone else can't handle its brightness. You were not made to be understood by everyone. You were made to live fully, with courage, honesty, and quiet fire. And sometimes, that kind of authenticity will make people uncomfortable. Let it. Let your peace speak louder than their whispers. Because in the end, what matters most isn't what they say, it's what you know, and you know who you are. Thank you for sitting with me in this moment. If this message met you where you are, I hope you'll share it with someone else who's feeling the sting of being misjudged. You're not alone, and your quiet strength is enough. Remember, let them gossip. You keep growing. 4. Focus on your own circle of control. You can't control what others say, but you can control your response, your attitude, and your actions. Consistency will reveal the truth over time. There's only so much in your hands, but that so much is everything. Let's begin with a question. How much energy do you spend trying to fix what's outside your control? Maybe you've tried to change someone's opinion of you. Maybe you've bent over backwards trying to be understood. Maybe you've lost sleep over what someone said, what they didn't say, or how they looked at you. We all do it. It's human, but it's also exhausting, and it rarely brings peace. There's a concept that changed my life, one I want to offer you today. It's called the circle of control. I first came across it through the teachings of Stephen Covey, the author of The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. He said that everything in life falls into 2 circles: the circle of concern, things we worry about, think about, stress over, but have no real control over; what others think, what others do, the economy, the weather, gossip, opinion, reaction, the circle of control, things that are fully ours, our response, our words, our choices, our discipline, our integrity. Most of us, without realizing it, live in the first circle. We obsess over things we can't change, trying to manage people's thoughts, feelings, behavior, and when we fail, we feel helpless, bitter, drained. But there's another way to live, a quieter, simpler, far more powerful way, and that's to bring your focus back to the only space you truly own, yourself. I want you to imagine a boundary, an invisible ring, that surrounds you. Inside that ring is everything you control, your effort, your attitude, your words, your daily choices. That's where your power is. That's where your peace begins. Let me share a story. There was a man named Thomas, a middle school principal, in a small town. He loved his work, but no matter how much effort he gave, there was always someone criticizing him, a group of parents who didn't agree with his approach, colleagues who questioned his leadership, staff who misread his decisions. At first, Thomas tried to defend himself through meetings, emails, long explanations. But the more he tried to fix their opinions, the more anxious he became. One day, his mentor told him something that changed his life. You're wasting your power in places you were never meant to control. From that moment on, Thomas made a shift. He stopped explaining. He stopped worrying about how people saw him. And he poured all his energy into showing up every single day with kindness, discipline, and consistency. A year later, the same people who once doubted him started respecting him, not because he convinced them with words, but because he let his life do the convincing. That's what focusing on your circle of control looks like. It means you stop trying to manage other people's narratives, and you start owning your own presence. Because here's a hard truth. You can't control whether people misunderstand you, but you can control whether you stay true to your values. You can't control their judgment, but you can control your joy. You can't control their actions, but you can control your reactions, and that's where your power is. Let me put it another way. You can't stop the wind, but you can learn to sail. I think of this often when I'm tempted to fix things I can't fix, when I want to make someone like me, or see my heart clearly. And every time, I'm reminded, your peace doesn't come from being understood. Your peace comes from being whole, and wholeness comes from living inside that circle, not chasing after shadows. The Stoics believed this too. Epictetus, a former slave who became a great philosopher, once said, "Happiness and freedom begin with a clear understanding of one principle. Some things are within our control, and some things are not. When you grasp that, you stop fighting the world, and you start building your world." Let's take this deeper. If someone criticizes you, that's not in your control. But how you carry yourself the next day, that is. If someone spreads false stories about you, that's not in your control. But your consistency, your discipline, your work ethic, that is. And over time, that consistency builds credibility, and credibility reveals the truth. Because truth doesn't need to rush. It's not in a hurry. It just needs to be steady. The people who matter, the ones with real wisdom and character, will see the truth, eventually. And those who refuse to see it, well, maybe they were never your audience to begin with. So what does it look like, practically, to stay inside your circle of control? It looks like waking up and choosing gratitude, even when people misunderstand you. Saying no to drama, even when you're tempted to speak back. Staying kind, even when people are cold. Sticking to your values, even when no one claps for you. And here's something I want you to really remember. Every time you focus on your circle of control, you get stronger. Every time you step outside of it, chasing approval or reaction, you become weaker. It's like lifting emotional weights. The more you stay centered, the more grounded you become. The more you react to what's outside, the more scattered and anxious you'll feel. So I ask you today, what are you trying to control that you were never meant to carry? Whose opinion are you chasing that was never yours to manage? What lie are you defending against instead of just living your truth? Let it go. Come back to your center, that sacred place where your peace lives. Because here's the miracle: when you live well, consistently, authentically, the truth will take care of itself. You don't need to chase it. You just need to be it. Thank you for sharing this space with me today. If this message spoke to you, if it reminded you to step back into your power, I hope you'll share it with someone else who's tired of carrying things they were never meant to carry. And as always, remember, stay in your circle. That's where your peace, your strength, and your future lives. 5. True freedom is when you're no longer controlled by other people's emotions, when you no longer react to provocation. You keep your inner power. It's not avoidance, it's freedom, real. Power doesn't shout, it stays still. Have you ever had someone push your buttons on purpose? They say something subtle, or not so subtle, just to see if they can get a reaction out of you. They poke at your past, your pride, your peace, and you feel it rise up, that fire in your chest, that itch to respond, to explain, to put them in their place. But then you pause, you breathe, you realize something powerful, something most people never figure out. You don't have to react. In that moment, not reacting isn't weakness, it's not fear, it's not avoidance. It's freedom. Let me say it another way. The moment you stop letting other people's emotions control yours, you reclaim your life. That's what we're talking about today. Not just emotional control, but emotional liberation. The kind of quiet strength that can walk through noise and stay untouched. You see, we live in a world where reaction is currency. People measure power by how quickly they can get under your skin. The internet rewards outrage. Arguments explode over nothing. And if you don't react, people say you're cold, or fake, or scared. But here's what they don't understand. Not reacting isn't giving up your power. It's protecting it. Let me tell you a story. There was a man named Caleb, a small business owner in Georgia. He ran a family-owned cafe for years, nothing fancy, just warm coffee and even warmer service. One day, a customer came in and began loudly accusing the staff of being rude. There was no real reason, just bitterness, noise. Everyone looked to Caleb, but he didn't argue. He didn't shout. He listened calmly, then offered the man a free cup of coffee and a quiet place to sit. Later, someone asked him, "Why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you defend yourself?" Caleb just smiled and said, "When someone throws fire, you can either throw more wood, or you can let it burn out by itself." That line stuck with me, because how many times do we throw wood? How many times do we feed the fire, not because we want to, but because we feel we have to? We let someone else's anger decide our peace. We let someone else's bitterness pollute our day. We give them that power and call it justice. But what if real justice is inner peace? What if true freedom is the ability to walk away, not because you're weak, but because you know what's worth your energy? You see, when you stop reacting, you're not suppressing your feelings. You're owning them. You're saying, "I get to decide what enters my space. I get to choose what deserves a seat at the table of my soul." And that, my friend, is the beginning of emotional freedom. The Stoics, ancient philosophers like Seneca and Marcus Aurelius, understood this well. They taught that you cannot control the actions of others, but you can always control your reaction. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. Marcus Aurelius, they weren't talking about ignoring your emotions. They were talking about something deeper: emotional mastery, the ability to observe without being owned, to feel without being pulled. So how do you live like that? How do you stay steady when someone tries to shake you? Let me share a few truths, not rules, just reflections from lived experience. Your emotions are not public property. You don't owe anyone your reaction. Not everyone deserves access to your peace. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes silence is a message. It says, you can shout all you want, I am unmoved. You can validate your feelings without acting on them. Feel hurt, acknowledge it. Feel angry, feel it. But don't let that emotion dictate your response. Let it pass through you, not take root in you. The strongest person in the room is rarely the loudest. Strength is presence, stillness, self-respect. Let me offer one more story. A woman named Renee worked as a nurse for over 20 years. One day, a patient's family member accused her of being careless, cruel, cold, It wasn't true. Everyone on the staff knew it. But Renee didn't raise her voice. She didn't rush to defend herself. She kept doing her rounds with compassion, quiet strength, gentle presence. Later that week, the family member came back, apologized, admitted they were projecting their grief, and Renee, she smiled, forgave, moved on. That's what emotional freedom looks like. You stop letting someone else's storm flood your shoreline, that you become the safe place, the steady presence, the person who doesn't need revenge, because peace is enough. And yes, this takes practice. You won't get it right every time. But every time you choose stillness over reaction, you build a kind of inner armor, a shield made of clarity, maturity, and deep self-trust. So the next time someone tries to provoke you, the next time a sharp comment, a passive-aggressive tone, or a cold shoulder comes your way, try this: pause, breathe, ask yourself, is this mine to carry? If not, let it go. Because you're not here to be dragged into battles that cost you your joy. You're not here to be a mirror for other people's pain. You're here to be free. And freedom doesn't always look like flying. Sometimes it looks like staying still while everything else tries to shake you. Thank you for sharing this moment with me. If you've been reacting too quickly, or letting someone else's energy dominate your days, I want you to know you can step out of that cycle. You can come back to center, and you can stay there. Remember, when you don't react, you remain free. That's not avoidance, that's power, that's peace, that's you finally in control. 6. Stoicism teaches that you don't need revenge. You need restraint. Don't answer with anger. The right silence, born from inner strength and self-respect, is the most powerful response. Just because you're provoked doesn't mean you have to respond. There's a quiet strength in you that maybe, just maybe, the world has tried to shake. You've been insulted. You've been disrespected. Someone lied about you, twisted your words, questioned your worth, and everything in you wanted to respond, to raise your voice, to defend your name, to make sure they know they can't treat you like that. But today, I want to offer you something different, something ancient, and yet deeply needed in this modern world. A lesson from Stoicism, the philosophy of inner mastery. You don't need to retaliate. You don't need to burn bridges. You don't need to match their energy. What you need is restraint. Let me say it clearly. Self-restraint is not weakness. It's wisdom in motion. The Stoic philosophers like Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca believed that our greatest power isn't in how we fight back, but in how we choose not to. Because when someone wrongs you and you don't react with the same energy, you're not losing the battle. You're rising above it. I know, that's not easy. We live in a time where reaction is glorified. The louder you are, the more you're noticed. Clap back. Put them in their place. Don't let anyone walk over you. But here's what Stoicism teaches us. If someone can control your reaction, they control you. So the goal isn't just winning. The goal is not being moved by petty things. There's a story I love about Marcus Aurelius, the Roman emperor who ruled one of the most powerful empires in history. He faced betrayal, criticism, and constant political games. And yet, in his personal writings, meditations, he wrote not about vengeance, but about perspective. He said, the best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury. In other words, don't become the very thing you despise. Don't answer cruelty with cruelty. Don't let someone else's weakness drag you out of your strength. Let me ask you something. Have you ever regretted staying calm? Think about it. You may have regretted yelling, texting back in anger, posting something you later deleted. But when you held your peace, when you took the high road, you walked away clean, whole, with your dignity intact. That's what I want for you. Let me tell you a true story. There was a woman named Claire, an executive at a non-profit in Seattle. She poured her heart into her work, only to find out that a colleague had been spreading lies about her to the board. It was calculated, cruel, and deeply personal. Everyone expected Claire to hit back, to expose, to fight. Instead, she said nothing. She kept doing her job, with even more excellence. She greeted her colleague in the hallway with a steady gaze and a quiet grace. She never raised her voice, never lowered her standards. Eventually, the truth surfaced, and when it did, the contrast between Claire's dignity and the other person's behavior was undeniable. She didn't need revenge. She had restraint, and it spoke volumes. You see, silence isn't always passive. Sometimes it's deeply intentional, a refusal to feed what doesn't deserve your energy. It's not about being cold, it's about knowing your worth. Because here's the thing, when you're rooted in self-respect, not everything gets a response. Let me offer you a few truths, lessons I've learned from experience, and from the teachings of the Stoics. Anger is natural, but it's not necessary. Feel the fire, but don't let it dictate your next move. As Seneca said, no man is more unhappy than he who never faces adversity. For he is not permitted to prove himself. You prove yourself in the storm, not by shouting back, but by standing still. Silence doesn't mean you weren't hurt. It means you chose healing over revenge. It means you chose yourself. Restraint is not suppression, it's direction. You're not bottling it up, you're channeling it into growth, into focus, into building a life so strong that no attack can derail it. Every moment of anger costs you clarity, and clarity is your true strength. When you stay clear, calm, and grounded, you stay in control of your life. Let me ask you this. What if your silence was your strength? What if your restraint was your message? What if your refusal to retaliate became your most powerful stand? Because eventually, people see. They may not notice right away, but over time, consistency reveals character, and the ones who tried to pull you down, they fade. Their noise becomes background static, and you keep rising. You keep walking with peace, with purpose, with power, the kind that doesn't need to shout. Here's one last thought. When someone attacks you, they want to feel powerful. They want to know they got under your skin. But when you look them in the eye, calm, composed, and you don't flinch, that's when they realize they never had power over you at all. You stayed centered. You stayed sovereign. You chose restraint, and in doing so, you chose freedom. Thank you for being here with me today. If you're someone who's been hurt, provoked, or wronged, I hope this message reminds you, you don't need to answer everything. You don't have to fight every fire. Sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is not respond. Let them talk. Let them stir. Let them twist. But you stay rooted. You stay whole. Because that's what real power looks like. And as the Stoics taught, master yourself, and no one else can master you. 7. The person who hurt you is often living in the worst version of themselves. When they lose you, they're not just losing a relationship. They're losing the kindest part of themselves. Sometimes people break you because they're already broken. It's one of the hardest things to accept in this life, that the people who hurt us the most are often the ones we once loved, trusted, and gave the best of ourselves to. They didn't come into our lives with warning labels. They didn't say, "One day I'll disappoint you. One day I'll wound you." They came in smiling, open arms, familiar voices, and then the shift, the silence, the betrayal, the sharpness in their voice you didn't recognize. And suddenly, you're standing in the aftermath of something you didn't cause, but you still have to carry it. Let me tell you something I wish someone had told me sooner. The person who hurt you was not at their best. They were operating from a broken place, a scared place, a version of themselves they'll one day have to answer for. But you were real, you were kind, you gave something genuine, and they lost that. And that loss, whether they know it or not, is far greater than just losing you. They lost the version of themselves that was capable of being better. Let me explain. When someone chooses cruelty, betrayal, or indifference, they're not just doing damage to you, they're doing violence to their own character. They're stepping away from their better self. They're pushing down the part of them that could have grown, matured, healed, had they chosen differently. Because every time we mistreat someone who showed us love, we don't just harm them, we dim something sacred within ourselves. I once knew a man named Daniel. He had a quiet presence, one of those people who didn't speak much, but when he did, you listened. He loved a woman named Elise with everything he had, and for a while, she loved him back, or so it seemed. But over time, she began to distance herself, criticized more, gave less, until one day, without much of a conversation, she left with someone else. It crushed Daniel, but he never retaliated, never spoke poorly of her. He said, if I was the softest place she could fall. And she walked away. Then she didn't just lose me. She lost the last place in herself where she could be gentle. That stuck with me. Because it's true, when someone hurts you, they're also hurting the part of themselves that once responded to love, kindness, and connection. And eventually, when the anger fades, when the distractions settle, when the noise dies down, they'll feel it. Maybe not today, maybe not this year, but one night, alone with their own mind, they'll remember your patience, your gentleness, the way you forgave too much and asked for too little, and they'll miss it. Not because they miss you as a possession, but because they miss who they were when they were safe with you. You see, we don't just lose people. We lose versions of ourselves that only existed in their presence. And when someone loses a connection that called them to be better, they are now left with the echo of their own worst behavior. Let me be clear, this isn't about excusing their actions. This isn't about romanticizing pain. It's about understanding something deeper, so we can heal. Because bitterness will tell you, they got away with it. But wisdom will tell you, they have to live with it. And they do. Even if they hide it well, even if they pretend to thrive, even if they jump into something new. No one escapes the consequences of turning away from goodness. The soul keeps the score. And what we do to others, we also do to ourselves. So if someone walked away from your love, your honesty, your softness, I want you to remember this. You didn't lose. You gave, and they weren't ready. Not for love that consistent, not for care that deep, not for someone who saw them as more than just a reflection of their wounds. And if they left, or betrayed, or deceived, then they are the ones who have to live with the version of themselves who chose that. You walked forward with clarity, with dignity, with an unshakable truth. You stayed kind, you stayed open, and nothing about that was foolish. That was strength, and that strength will carry you into something real. Let me share one more story. A woman named Marianne spent 15 years in a marriage where she gave everything: support, encouragement, forgiveness. Her husband eventually had an affair and left without remorse. Everyone told her to be angry, to fight, to destroy him, but she chose a different path. She said, I was the best version of myself with him, and he couldn't meet me there. He lost more than I did. Now, years later, Marianne is remarried, peaceful, grounded, and when asked how she forgave, she simply says, I didn't want to carry someone else's wounds inside my heart. You see, the moment you realize that someone else's failure to love you is not a reflection of your worth, you begin to heal. And when you understand that they were living in the worst version of themselves when they hurt you, you begin to let go. You don't excuse, but you release. You stop holding your breath waiting for closure. You become your own closure. And that, my friend, is where your future begins. Thank you for walking through this reflection with me. If this spoke to something in you, I want you to remember you were the kindest part of someone else's story. And if they lost you, they lost far more than they'll ever admit. But you're still here, still growing, still capable of love, and now wiser about where to give it. Point 8. Let time and character untangle everything. Rumors are temporary. Character is permanent. You don't need to explain yourself. Just live right. In time, people will see what's real and what's not. You don't need to rush the truth. It always finds its way home. In this noisy, fast-paced world we live in, there's one thing people seem more addicted to than ever: judgment without context. People hear a rumor, they fill in the blanks, they assume the worst, they form opinions with half the story, and even less compassion. And you're left standing there, holding your silence like a shield, wondering, should I say something? Should I explain? Should I fight back? But today, I want to tell you something that might bring your heart back to peace. You don't need to explain yourself to everyone. You don't need to fight every rumor. You just need to keep living with integrity. And let time and your character do the rest. Let me say this more clearly. Rumors are temporary. Character is permanent. They can say what they want, whisper what they want, speculate, distort, misinterpret. But they can't rewrite who you are. They can't change how you show up in the world every single day with honesty, consistency, and grace. And over time, those who matter will see the difference. I once heard a quote that felt like a revelation. Time exposes the truth. You don't have to. Let that settle for a second. Because when you've been misunderstood, misrepresented, even betrayed, the urge to correct the narrative is real. We want to be heard. We want to be seen. But not everyone's eyes are ready to see the truth, especially when the lie is more entertaining. And that's where your discipline comes in. I knew a man named Michael, a high school teacher in New Mexico, loved by his students, respected by his peers, until one day, an anonymous complaint surfaced. Vague accusations about his teaching style, his bias, his inappropriateness. It wasn't true, but the whispers began. The school put him on leave. His name floated through inboxes and conversations, and Michael, he said nothing to defend himself publicly. Instead, he wrote one simple line in his journal: "Let my years of character answer for me." Weeks passed. Investigations cleared him. No wrongdoing, no truth in the rumors. But what remained? His calm, his presence, his strength, the quiet kind that doesn't depend on applause or explanation, because real character doesn't need defending. It just needs consistency. You see, when people talk about you behind your back, they're building a story based on assumption. But your life, the way you treat people, the way you work, the way you respond with grace instead of anger, that's the true narrative. And that narrative is written not in words, but in patterns. Day after day, year after year. That's what people remember. Not the drama. Not the noise, but your steadiness. Let me ask you something. Have you ever believed something about someone, only to realize later that you were wrong? Maybe you heard a rumor or a one-sided version of a story. Maybe someone planted a seed of doubt, and you made a quiet judgment until time revealed the truth. We've all been there, and that's why it's so important to give time the space to work. Because time, partnered with character, always tells the truth better than any explanation ever could. There's a principle I live by now. Clarity takes time. Stay steady. Not everyone needs to understand you right now. Not everyone needs access to your truth. What matters is this: that you keep showing up with honesty, that your actions match your values, that you let your life, not your words, be the proof. There's a beautiful story I once heard about a woman named Teresa, a social worker in Chicago. She was falsely accused by a co-worker of misconduct, something that, if believed, could have ruined her career. But instead of going on a defensive campaign, she did something extraordinary. She stayed silent, not because she was guilty, but because she trusted time to do what words couldn't. She told her supervisor, "I've shown you who I am for 12 years. Let that be my voice." Eventually, the truth came out. The accuser recanted. And Teresa's quiet grace, it became legendary in her field. You see, truth doesn't always arrive on your schedule, but it always arrives. So if you're walking through a season right now where people are misunderstanding you, where lies are louder than your truth, I want to remind you, you don't need to shout. You don't need to fight dirty. You don't need to burn bridges. You just need to be who you've always been. Because the truth is magnetic, and over time, it draws people back to what's real. Here's what Stoicism, that ancient, grounded philosophy, teaches us: waste no more time arguing what a good person should be. Be one. That's the message. Don't argue your goodness. Live it. Let it speak for you. And let time do what it always does: reveal everything, heal everything, clarify everything. Because character isn't built in crisis, it's revealed in it. So when people come for you, when your name is tossed around in half-truths and speculation, breathe. Let your peace be louder than their noise. Let your discipline be deeper than their drama. And let your life, day by day, moment by moment, speak for itself. Because what's real doesn't need to rush. Thank you for sitting with this message today. If you've been wounded by misunderstanding or shaken by unfair judgment, I hope this reminded you of your inner strength, the kind that doesn't chase approval, but stands firm in truth. Let time and character do the work. They always do. By now, perhaps you've realized life isn't always fair. People aren't always kind. But Stoicism never asked you to fix the world. It invites you to master yourself within it. You cannot stop others from misunderstanding you. You can't silence every rumor. You can't avoid pain. But you can choose to respond with composure, to stay consistent in your values, to protect your inner dignity. and to let timely silence speak louder than any argument. Those who hurt you may have lost the best part of themselves, but you don't need revenge, because true character requires no defense, only time, and a steady soul. So if you're living by these values or seeking to build a deeper, calmer, more centered life, know this: you are not alone. Hit subscribe and join our growing community of modern Stoics, where inner peace, personal depth, and character are the true measures of a meaningful life. We're not just making videos, we're building a way of living with you.